Welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. This episode kicks off our brand new series where we are exploring the potential of AI. This episode specifically looking at AI in higher education, and we've got a brilliant guest to kick things off with, Dr. Claire Brady, who is a nationally recognized educator who's a passionate advocate for AI in higher education. Dr. Brady is leading the charge in AI literacy as a vocal advocate across higher education. Claire is dedicated to equipping executive teams and student affairs professionals with the necessary tools and knowledge to leverage the immense potential of AI in their personal and professional lives. In this episode, we talk about both the personal and professional use cases. And folks, for those of us in K-12 education, this conversation is really useful because it's going to set you up to be able to better speak to parents, caregivers, and your students about the ways that higher education is shifting and the ways that it is going to be more accessible for students. Before we kick off our conversation with Dr. Brady, we do have a quick word from our show sponsor.
Discover the power of acknowledgement with Libra. In a world where every staff member's dedication shapes the future, recognizing their efforts becomes our mission. Libra transforms your school into a place where achievements, big and small, are celebrated daily, creating a ripple effect of motivation and pride. Join the recognition revolution with Libra, where every achievement is a cause for celebration. For more information and a free demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com today.
And now with that, welcome to the show, Dr. Claire Brady. Dr. Brady, such a joy and a treat to be chatting with you today. Our conversation has to grapple that the world of AI is moving incredibly rapidly. So many of us are just getting our heads around what exponential growth means. And we're learning about the concept of exponential growth because of this AI infusion into all things education. Today's conversation is going to focus on AI and higher education. And I'm going to ask you from an aspirational stance, when you're thinking about this current academic year's college student, what do you hope? That's the key word here. What do you hope AI integration might look like for, again, today's college student?
Sure. Well, how about I start with telling you where it is and where I think it's headed this year? So the first thing I'll tell you is that right now, colleges and universities are using AI tools really to enhance their existing systems, right? Rather than to replace them. So tools like ChatGPT and Gemini are being used to craft, say, personalized emails or create web content or develop targeted social media campaigns. And tools like virtual assistants and chatbots are becoming more and more common, offering 24/7 support for general questions, like in the admissions process or financial aid process. Machine learning algorithms are helping with advanced analytics to help us build predictive models. So that's already in existence. Where I'm seeing some significant movement this summer and into this fall is really about how these tools will be integrated into the learning management systems, the student information systems to create personalized learning experiences, to automate administrative tasks and provide real-time analytics on student engagement and student performance. So AI-driven platforms are also expected to improve things like resource allocation or generate advanced reports and support strategic decision-making. So I hope that for our college students, very soon, that higher ed leaders really are using AI to help us solve some of the biggest barriers to student engagement and student success. So I want higher ed to be more predictive, more personalized, more accessible, and I want it to be loaded with opportunities for human interactions in all forms. So some ways that I think AI is going to help us do that in the next, say, 12 to 18 months. I think we're going to start to see more customized student experiences. We're going to see interactive learning tools, personalized student support, tailored communications, more enhanced communications, so automated communications. We're going to see much more 24/7 availability of services and resources. And then we're just going to see all of our tools begin to talk to each other and work with each other better. Right now, we have staff that are logging into maybe 5, 6, 7 platforms in a given hour at work. And so many of these tools are going to help us to create a more continuous and holistic support. So there's a lot of possibility there for the student experience. Much of this is happening in small pockets around the country, but it's going to become much more widespread very soon.
Well, and I appreciate you walking us through, again, how quickly this is going to seamlessly integrate in a lot of different aspects. And I think in order to have that aspirational stance, for me, something that's been really helpful is paying attention to some of the positive use cases. Just today, I was looking at some of the research that's come out of Cambridge about AI helping us predict Parkinson's.
Right.
And I was chatting with my neighbor. Most of my neighborly conversation is always about dogs because I live with an amazing dog. I think they're great. And so my neighbor was asking me a little bit about my work. And oh, does the dog have anything to do with it? And she was joking. And I said, you jest. But actually, I have been curating a lot of research around animal communication and what AI is doing to speed that up. And we had this conversation and she was like, I need to know more about that. Can you get me some resources? And like I curated a few of my favorites. Well, and she did too. And what she said to me, Dr. Brady, was, this is refreshing because when I pay attention to the media, I only get the doom and gloom.
The real scary, the robots are coming. They're going to take everything over and we're going to stop being able to think critically or be able to write or read. And there's so many opportunities here that could help us do the fundamentals even better.
Yeah. And what comes to mind for me, this coming week, I'm working with some pre-service educators. I have this activity I do that it's like a forced analogy where we're talking about media literacy. So the question I have in the middle is, what as a child was your media diet mostly? And I have in each of the corners a different object. And it's more of a metaphor. One of them is like a scattering of puzzle pieces. Another one is a winding road. And when I'm working with older students, I don't usually say what the corner is supposed to represent. That's some of the thinking. Right. But this year, what I'm doing slightly differently in the course is I've had ChatGPT give me a stereotypical response by their generation, because I want them to decode what are some of the stereotypes about your generation. But I've also had it map out, and all I did was upload this image. I had it generate a table of possible interpretations of each of the 4 corners for that person who doesn't want to, they're just having a bad day. Yeah. So the idea of a forced analogy is a bridge too far. Here's a menu of different ways to think about the scattered puzzle pieces.
Think about the multimodal aspect of that, right? It doesn't only have to be text. It could be sounds or it could be visuals. And that's another kind of area where we're going to see a lot of advancement, is that we're so text focused right now. But imagine that same activity where you had music playing or the sounds of a marketplace or something like that. It's so cool.
Well, when you're talking about resource allocation, my brain is still in summer mode.
Mine too.
And a long time ago, my wife and I lived in Singapore, and I was they're making great leaps and bounds with AI integration. And I was reading this story about how they're automating their pickleball court allocation. Amazing. So you no longer have to go and the wait times. They're doing all this different predictive analysis to make it a better pickleball experience for everybody there. And I'm thinking about pickleball a lot because it's summer. So I'm wondering, when you're talking about AI and resource allocation, I'm guessing you're not talking about pickleball in the higher ed context.
No, but think about scarce resources, right? So much of what we do in education is actually more manual than we actually want to admit. So many things are on Excel spreadsheets and login and registrations, and we don't have a budget. So we buy the tool that we can get with the budget we have, and maybe not the best tool for an integration. And so we cobble together all these resources, and we're surprised when students struggle to manage that the advising office has a different sign-in process than the financial aid office, than their faculty member, right? They don't see the silos that we create. They just see the institution, right? And then based on budget and resources and other things, we cobble together this experience. And then, so for me, you mentioned healthcare, right? I think healthcare is the analog here. This is the one we need to be looking to. They have a lot more money than the rest of us in research and development. So I want to acknowledge that. But imagine you leave your doctor's office with the aftercare notes, and they're written for you at your reading level in your preferred or first language. That would be huge, right? To that last mile of healthcare. That's happening. But then if you take that same concept and you apply it to an educational setting where a student is meeting with an advisor about their academic path or what classes are going to transfer and what aren't, what homework they need to do, career development's another great area, right? Experiential learning. These are all areas that could be really helped by what they're learning in healthcare. We could apply it in education so simply, right? And so many of the things that are happening there, we're not only going to benefit from as customers, as patients, but education can take many of those ideas and apply them in our context very easily. So it's like stuff like that gets me really excited about what's happening in other areas. And honestly, I tell my clients mostly, look outside of education. Look at what the corporate world is doing. Look at how many of them are saving hours with how they're processing accounts payable and accounts billable, right? Institutions have business offices too, and HR departments and IT departments and all of that. They're a business. So I really look to healthcare as being one of those really important areas. And I'm inspired by what's happening. I think we just have to have somewhat of a little bit of a mindset shift in higher ed in particular.
Well, and as you said, like the power of if I had personalized instructions on my medicine and then reminders maybe or check-ins.
And it was maybe my Apple Watch is telling them that I didn't take my medicine that day, or I haven't done my 5,000 steps, or I haven't seen my PT or whatever it might be. It's all connected and holistic, right?
Well, the PT example is perfect, Dr. Brady, because I'm thinking about, hey, when I was doing physical therapy, I'll be honest, doing the stretches they wanted me to do.
It's that last mile of healthcare, the hardest.
Oof, you've got to do it. But I really struggled to do it. And having an automated reminder would be great. And that would be great in the higher ed context where maybe it's you're at that age where your joint pain is less and maybe stretching is not as significant as it is for me. As it like, have I checked in with my academic advisor?
Have you logged into the learning management system? You could even go real basic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The power of reminders can be, You offer a workshop, and listeners, I'm going to link to this in the show notes so you can check it out, that helps student affairs teams consider which tools are worth their time, because we have no shortage of AI tools every day. This is where you can really see the exponential growth. Outside of just the academics, how do you think that student experience in college has already shifted because of AI? I think it's really interesting that you've got this honed in student affairs type of training that you're doing. Can you paint a picture? Our audience are K-12 educators. So when they're talking to their graduating seniors about this is what's going to be a little different, what's a picture that you can paint for us?
So I think one thing to understand is that student affairs is basically all of the student-facing services that are not happening within the classroom setting, with the exception of libraries or learning centers. But it's the advisor, it's the bursar's office and admissions and all the things that students interact with daily on a college campus, whether they're taking classes in person or online. So what I can tell you is the average student experience has not significantly shifted yet, but we are on the brink of substantial change. So I don't see a lot of complex or enterprise use yet of AI tools. And I'm hoping that some of our vendor friends will bring more embedded AI tools into the technologies that we already have and pay millions of dollars every year for. Think of the way that Grammarly has the tool embedded, or MailChimp or Workday or even LinkedIn Premium, right? They built it, they tried it, they're improving it constantly. So currently AI usage in higher ed is really localized to specific roles, like in admissions or advising an individual faculty, maybe a librarian who's doing some AI literacy work. So these are individuals and departments using these tools to improve a process or a specific content. So it's not scaled for impact yet, but that's really on the horizon. What I'm seeing a noticeable increase in is the use of virtual assistants and chatbots, more than just the generic chatbot that exists on their website. Do you want to know more about XYZ University? Institutions are creating tailored chatbots for specific key moments in the student's academic career. So imagine a first year student who is just getting admitted, then they need to complete a lot of paperwork. They need to do orientation. They need to register for classes. We lose a huge number of students in higher ed just based on the complexity of the prep work for the first semester, right? And so we're seeing these chatbots coming out that are really laser sharp targeted at just those particular moments in a student career. So imagine you could extrapolate that for other populations, a veteran or an international student or a non-traditional student or a dual enrollment student. So what you'll start to see is that students are going to be engaged with these chatbots to help them navigate these processes. So they could do that at midnight, which is when the chatbot technology folks are telling us is the highest usage time of the whole day is at midnight, right? A lot of our students are doing this pretty late in the day. Recent report came out that said 49% of students and 22% of faculty are using AI in their courses. But if you spend any time with students, and I spend a lot of time with students, you're going to realize that number is actually much higher. They define it maybe differently than we do. So I recently brought a president's cabinet, his board, and a student government association board into a computer lab together. And I asked the students in a totally safe space to demonstrate how they use various AI tools. And the insights were, to be very honest, mind-blowing, right? The board members and the cabinet's eyes were so big. So students are creatively partnering with these tools to do things like ideate research paper topics, or to create flashcards, or to create journals, or create visual art and music, or search alternate sources for information. My 12-year-old uses ChatGPT as his primary search engine. That's a massive shift in digital literacy and AI literacy. And so the students are using AI tools for academic purposes and personal purposes, but they're using it interchangeably. And so in my opinion, what the students are doing versus what the institution is doing is drastically different. The institution really needs to catch up with the students, right? So ultimately, the goal of AI integration in higher ed and student affairs is not to replace staff or to have less faculty, but it's to free up time, right, for high value student support tasks. So when I was a young advisor and I would have a student in my office, I would have 30 minutes, maybe 5 minutes of, hey, how's it going? Tell me what's new. And then I would have probably 20 minutes of looking at a computer screen and comparing what they were telling me to what I was seeing and verifying things. And then I would quickly ask them if they had any questions. And if they did, I would often have to ask them to sign up for another 30-minute appointment, right? Imagine if our tools were more advanced and more integrated, more predictive. They were giving the advisor nudges about when to reach out to the student. And then you didn't spend that whole time just trying to get all of your tools to talk to each other, right? Imagine the type and quality of interaction you could have with that student in that moment, even if it's still only 30 minutes, but you're not spending so much time with kind of clunky process stuff. So for me, higher ed staff are going to start to really leverage some of these AI technologies, and they're going to be able to scale and tailor their impact to better support students. So I always ask my clients, how did you do it when we introduced the calculator in math classes? And I know not everybody loves the calculator comparison, but okay, so what about when libraries moved into the digital space, or when we moved fully online at the onset of the pandemic? We got it done. We prioritized student learning. We prioritized the student experience, then we had to iterate a few times to get it right. And so I think as you think about your K-12 professionals thinking about their student entering college this year, know that the student will often have more advanced skills and more knowledge about the AI tools than the institution at this moment in time.
Yeah. And again, of course, that's not everybody.
Right.
Like I'm loving following like Dr. Ethan Mollick, whose work is pretty groundbreaking with this. Dr. Philippa Hardman. There's some great folks in the higher ed space to follow
Absolutely.
and watch. But I also think the potential danger with a gap like that, as you mentioned, to use a large language model as a search engine.
It's problematic on so many levels.
It's on so many levels. And I think this is where if in K-12, we're not doing that educational piece
that
around
AI literacy. Yeah.
The AI literacy is huge, right? So that gap can really, again, there's some things to really watch out for in terms of bridging that gap. My experience has been for a lot of folks who maybe have a resistance to learning about it. And I always like to make sure I'm not saying, hey, you do not have to use this for all the things. But if you're in education, you probably want to be aware of the implications. And often folks will like open that door a little bit if we're looking at personal use cases before the professional ones. And I think in education, so many folks feel a real pressure to like, but I'm the expert. I have to know all the things, right?
You can't be a novice at anything, right? You have to know how to do everything. Well, I'm working on a really massive research project right now with NASPA, which is my professional home, it's basically the National Association for Student Affairs folks, and with the Strata Educational Foundation. And what I've spent the last few months doing is really collecting from around the country emerging use cases in several areas within higher education, and then forecasted use cases. And I will tell you, there's some cool things happening, but people seem reticent to even present at conferences or to even call their work pioneering because they're in such a pilot stage of it. But what they don't realize is they're really way more advanced, a year more advanced than most of their peers. So if anyone's listening that's doing something interesting with AI, have a little more confidence, right? Get the word out that you're doing it because other people will really be inspired and will create their own version of it. But it took me months to collect these emerging use cases, and they're really impressive. And a lot of the institutions have collected multiple cycles of data and are able to show significant impact, but they're just not really singing it from the rooftops, which I wish they were.
And that's, again, I think for me, LinkedIn has been really useful right now. And I hear you because every once in a while, I will be like bashful in sharing something that I'm doing.
You shouldn't. Please,
all summer.
Sing it.
I get over it. I do get over it pretty quickly. But something that I've been sharing, and again, the transparency has been huge. And I hesitated because I'm like, is this really share worthy, LinkedIn worthy? And of course, people can scroll right past. There's no pressure for them to pause. But I'm an avid reader. Summer is reading season. I know some people think of it as baseball season. I think of it as reading season. And so every library haul that I bring home, I take a picture of all the books together, upload it to ChatGPT, and I tell it to, it's a lengthy prompt, but in short, it's something along the lines of, please look for thematic connections and give me the order in which I should read these texts for an optimal reading experience. And give me a few like reflective questions that are going to help me make those connections. Dr. Brady, it's pretty extraordinary what it will give back to me.
What a brilliant idea. I'm a reader. I need to do this. This is amazing.
I'll share some of the prompts that I've used with you, but it's been so fun to experiment with. And I'll even ask it to give me like a song recommendation so I can build out a playlist for my reading.
Brilliant. I love chaining. I'll figure something out and then I'll think, what else could I do with this? I take every college in the country has a set of really complex policies. And they've been through every lawyer, and they're 20 pages long, but they also really impact the student experience. So a lot of times with clients, we'll take these really complex policies and we'll put it through one of the tools and ask it to rewrite it at a 6th grade reading level, let's say, to simplify the terminology and define the terminology. And then we start chaining things we could do with that more simplified information. We create a training for new employees, and we create a module for new student orientation, and we create a social media educational campaign, all from that one first prompt. And then we chain from there. And I can't tell you how many institutions have taken these really complex, either a Title IX policy or it's a student satisfactory academic progress in higher ed is like the most complex thing around Title IV funding. And we do this chaining activity with it, and people's minds are just blown. Because you're not building any new content. You're taking your existing content and you're just simplifying it to be more user-friendly. I love it.
And those policies are going to get engaged with in ways that they never have before. Yeah. So I love that because, again, I think you ask folks like, do you know even if the policy exists, they might not be sure. And we can go to this kind of place.
Thank you for tuning in to Shifting Schools. Let's pause our discussion to spotlight Libra HQ, a breakthrough in using AI to deepen connections within organizations. Imagine an environment where every staff member feels truly seen and valued. This is the heart of Libra's mission. Libra transforms how leaders celebrate and recognize the personal and professional milestones of their team members. It's not just about reminders. Libra's AI dives deeper, offering insight into enhanced team cohesion and promote a culture where support and acknowledgement are paramount. Picture a school where every individual is acknowledged, from work achievements to personal victories, creating a culture of appreciation in just minutes a day. In these challenging times, where the demands on educators have never been higher, Libra offers a way for school leaders to lead with true empathy and compassion, ensuring every team member feels an integral part of their community's success. Discover how Libra can revolutionize your school's culture. For a demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com. Let's build a future where every educator and staff member feels connected and valued. And now, let's get back to our conversation.
Dr. Brady, when you were doing that research and you were trying to find those use cases, did you put a call out? What was your research process like?
So I have a pretty extensive network. I've worked in higher ed for 25 years. I'm pretty well known in all the associations. And my original call out, I got almost no responses to because I used the term pioneering. And nobody thinks, so I changed it. I went to emerging or interesting, or then I eventually went to basic, right? Trying to get folks. And eventually I had to start calling people. I had to start looking at who was presenting at conferences or who had written papers. I called the vendors themselves and said, who are you working with that I can call? I used my connections within the academic community to say, who are the faculty that are leading interesting research in this area? And it felt like guerrilla research. It was so interesting. Whereas normally you put out a call on LinkedIn, for example, and I have 1,000 higher ed connections, you'd get a good number, right? But no one thinks that they're really doing anything that should be maybe blared out nationally. And then once I would call them, they'd say, well, actually, that's not the only thing we're doing. We're doing these other 2 things as well. And so I was able to write some really interesting kind of cases, use cases, in particular in that emerging category. D'Youville University in Buffalo, New York, right? They brought me in to do an AI speech. And while I was there, I started asking questions and I found out that it was their developmental theme for the year. They had a competition for their staff to who could figure out the most efficiencies with AI tools. They had invited Sophia the robot to be one of their commencement speakers. They were giving out the Oculus to all first-year students and doing all kinds of explore. And they didn't tell me any of that before I got to campus, right? So you have to ask a lot of questions and I had to work the network. And I'm hoping that when this research comes out very soon, we had really focused on the areas of academic advising, career services, and student success is a pretty broad term. It usually ends up falling into the area of academic resources and support. So libraries, learning centers, writing, all of that. There's so many other areas of higher ed that we could go to next. So we're hoping that when this comes out, we'll then put the call out and it'll be a much broader response. But it took me a while and it was a lot of work.
I'm really glad that I asked that question because there's many things I'm excited about in your response, but how important it is for us to remember that word choice aspect and that, there can be a real hesitation to self-identify something as pioneering.
Right.
I love
hard,
that.
Right? I get it.
Can I ask if you are able to share an example of one of the forecasted ideas, or do we have
I feel like NASPA would support me in this particular example. So I've worked a lot with health profession students and really struggled to get them enough internships, externships, experiential learning where they really can try on a lot of different aspects of the work. So when I was in college, I did an internship at Doctors Without Borders. And I spent a whole summer in New York City and it cost my parents a lot of money. And at the end of the summer, I said, well, that was nice. And I'll always support Doctors Without Borders, but I never want to do that job. I probably could have saved some money there. So what I'm really excited about in forecasted use cases, in particular in career services, is around the use of virtual reality and simulation for experiential learning for career development. So imagine a first-year nursing student who could do simulation or virtual reality and spend time on various hospital wards. What's it like to be in peds versus what's it like to be in maybe the dementia unit or something like that. Think about the student who maybe doesn't have access or the funding to go away for an entire summer and do an internship, but could chain together various virtual experiences and then build up the capacity to be able to go and do a more traditional internship later on. In that area, I think we have some very exciting things coming in career services, especially because career services departments, probably like many of the counselors in the K-12, there's just not enough of them, and they're so special and they're so important and they're doing the most important work, but they're usually an advising ratio of 1,000 to 1. And so they really are working on trying to scale up their impact. So having AI tools where the student could have agency to be able to go and do some of that exploration on their own in a vetted system that the nursing faculty is supportive of and has said, yes, this has our blessing, is a great example of a forecasted use case in career services.
That is like a super cool use case, because I'm also thinking of, it's not the intended outcome, but a nice byproduct too. I could imagine healthcare workers, notoriously right now underappreciated.
Absolutely. Teachers.
I think if a lot of folks, teachers, yes, if a lot of folks could go through a simulation where they understood, here's what that context is, they might have a completely different perspective.
Social work. There's so many areas that you have to have a master's degree to even break into. And so how do you build that pipeline of really interested, engaged students? This could be a way.
The scenario thing, I think, is huge. And I think, too, of students who are dealing with also the social dynamic with different work environments. If I'm neurodiverse and I'm also maybe feeling a little bit nervous about going
confidence
into
and competence, right? What about the student who works full time, or the student with children, or the student who has anxiety? There's all types of scenarios where this could really play out for the student to build their confidence and competence.
I think, again, understanding the potential is really important, but it's hard because this is also a conversation that feels super polarizing right now. Friends that I know who are in higher ed, it really feels like either they're all in or they absolutely never want to hear those two letters, AI. When it comes to broadening, expanding the conversation about AI and higher education, what is maybe just one question that you would love to hear folks exploring a little bit more this year, and why?
So I think it really was heated for a bit there, right? And I don't think all the movies around sci-fi robots taking over your life has helped us in any kind of way. But I think the heat has died down. And I think as I talk to higher ed leaders, it's more of a foregone conclusion. It's here, right? Often I'll have a college president say to me, "Oh, you're a futurist." And I always say to them, "No, I'm a nowist. I'm not a futurist. It's here. It's at our doorstep." So I'm really happy to see that higher ed is finally moving beyond or they were really stuck for a long time there in that cheating and academic integrity issue. And if healthcare has figured it out, folks, we can too, right? Healthcare, who has much stricter rules around privacy and cybersecurity and all types of things, have figured out a way they're really at the intersection of kind of that ethical piece and the innovation piece. So I'm really happy that higher ed has moved on to more interesting and pressing discussions. So I always ask institutions, how could this massive technology shift help us to do our mission critical work, where we focus around teaching and learning, access, equity, student success, and workforce demands? And as I work with college and university leaders, it's clear to me that they want to increase both their competence and their confidence in regard to AI, but they're not used to being novices and having so few answers directly available to them. So in the current state of higher ed, under attack from every direction, our bandwidth right now for another massive disruption isn't really optimal. The difference here is that I know that AI can absolutely help us do that really hard mission critical work. So you asked what question I would ask. I would love to see institutions asking, what problems can AI help us to solve, instead of what problems will AI force us to solve? And that's, I think, the distinction for me.
Oof, that's very exciting. And I do wonder to what extent certain colleges and universities are going to maybe really be enticing to students because they are. I love that nowist idea. Because they are embracing the now. As you were mentioning, the customized chatbots, the Washington Post has just released one for all of their climate reporting. Again, all of the data has been fed in. It's based on its own system.
Are you creating your own GPTs yet?
I am. Yes, I created one that will whatever situation I am going through, it's going to encourage me with a Shania Twain lyric and explain the relevance of that
Hilarious.
lyric with my situation. So the playing around is critical, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. I think if you are a beginner, the best starting point is to
Play, right? Be
play.
curious. OpenAI is releasing like 30 new tools a day. I had a client call me this week, so funny, and say, I just noticed there's an attachment icon on ChatGPT. So I got curious and I attached some stuff. And now I'm doing all kinds of interesting things. Think about how many performance appraisals a lot of our managers have to do. And if you interview them and say, what are your PD needs for next year? Oftentimes the needs of the one or two that are really struggling become the most kind of at the forefront, right? So I had a client take all of their performance appraisals anonymized, put them through a tool and ask it to do an analysis of what the PD needs are for next year. And the list was vastly different. Now, does that one or two people need those specific interventions? Of course they do. But all in all, as they were designing their PD for the whole year, it looked very different based on the tool having less bias, right? And going through and taking the anonymized performance reviews. And now all of a sudden you have an analysis. Now imagine an HR department who could take 10 years of those. I think it's going to be, there's some exciting stuff happening there.
There is really exciting stuff there. I might just sneak in a bonus question here, and I'll preface it and give you time to think it over. But I think, again, yes, when you notice that a tool has a new icon, a lot of it is like experiment with it, play with it. And I love that idea of all the different things that actually you can attach and upload. It's my summer of gardening. I've really gone all in on gardening this summer, Dr. Brady. And I was like, I'm not sure if this is going to work. The little like plant identifiers that are stuck in. Okay, so I pulled all of those out when I bought a bunch of plants. I took a picture of them all together. And I told it like the dimensions of how much room I had and like which direction the ground was facing. And I'm like, give me a planting plan that's going to optimize growth. I told it where I was located. And then I also asked it to give me like a table format of when I should potentially see some kind of growth, blah, 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 blah. Personal use case, right? Like not a professional one. I was like, this is a really interesting kind of map for me to plant. I have to play with it. I have to try it out. And I'm wondering, let's put higher ed, your world, aside for a moment. I'm wondering, can you leave our listeners with a personal use case? And it doesn't have to be one that you're thinking like, it wasn't pioneering to use your lesson for me today, but something that you tried out that it helps you think about the power of playing with this technology in order to understand where it might go.
So let me give you a controversial one because it's so AI headshots. All of these career centers across the country have gotten all this funding to buy these really expensive photo booths to put into their university career centers. I don't begrudge any of them. The student has to show up, walk in, have the outfit on, take the pictures, wait several weeks or whatever. I use a company called Secta Labs. I've used a variety of companies. They're currently my favorite. I don't take any financial compensation from any vendor, even though they all keep trying, because I want my clients to trust what I say. And all of my pictures on my website and on my social platforms are AI generated. Now, my partner hates it, thinks it's creepy, thinks it's weird, doesn't like the pictures, right? My 12-year-old thinks it's the coolest thing that we're seeing their whole life. And my mom keeps telling me I'm beautiful on Facebook. It's really, some of them don't work out. Some of them are wrong. I want to look like a 47-year-old plus size woman. Like that's what I want to look like. So I'm only going to pick the pictures that are a mostly realistic version. Maybe I look a little bit less tired, but there's an option there. And I always think about that student who doesn't have access to a suit, who doesn't have access to a $300 photographer in the case of a lot of people getting their hair done or their makeup done or going to a barber shop and all those things. And these are really, for 20 something dollars in some cases, you could have hundreds of pictures. And then they have remix options where if you like that picture, but maybe you want to be standing in front of the Golden Gate Bridge or you want to be standing in a forest, you can do that, right? It's controversial in the sense that people don't love a picture that doesn't have a tag on it. That's coming in the AI world as well. But right now, if you go to my website, every one of those pictures was AI generated. Not a single one of them was taken on my phone. Now they're generated from the pictures I uploaded. So it's my mouth, my eyes, my teeth in some cases, right? But it's really, for me, an access issue for a lot of new professionals in particular who are expected to have really polished social media presence, really polished LinkedIn, and you can't just ask your neighbor to take your picture anymore, right? So there's an idea I would leave the listeners with is just see what's out there. It's very interesting.
Well, and listeners, Dr. Brady actually has, and again, correct me if I'm phrasing this wrong, but you've got a whole blog post that you
I did
wrote
this week,
about
actually.
experimenting
Yeah,
with all
yeah.
of them. Yes. So I'll be sure to link that in as well, because you're right. That access piece, like having a professional photographer is
So
super expensive.
And I don't want to take, if that's your jam and you love to do that, wonderful. But many of our students could never afford that in a million years, right? It is controversial. It's very interesting. And on that blog post, I have some fails too, because if you want to see what it looks like with bows coming out of my head or looks nothing like me. So it has some good pictures, but also some good fails on there. Good laugh.
I think those are, again, it's important to be sharing those as well. Dr. Brady, what a joy to be chatting with you. I can't wait until that research comes out. I want to learn all about more of the forecasted ideas. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and time with us today.
Appreciate it.